All right, guys, finally, I want to talk about plagiarism. We're going to take a look at this passage right here. We're going to look at this one up here, and then we're going to look at this one down here. So the rise of industry, the growth of cities, and the expansion of the population were the three great developments of the late 19th century American history. As new, larger, steam-powered factories became a feature of the American landscape in the East, they transformed farmlands into industrial laborers and provided jobs for the rising tide of immigrants. With industry came urbanization, the growth of large cities like Fall River, Massachusetts, where the Bordens lived, which became the centers of production as well as of commerce and trade. Here's an unacceptable version that's actually plagiarism. The increase of industry, the growth of cities, and the explosion of the population were three large factors of 19th century America. As steam-driven companies became more visible in the eastern part of the country, they changed farmlands. They changed farmhands into factory workers and provided jobs for the large waves of immigrants. With industry came the growth of cities like Fall River, where the Bordens lived, which turned into centers of commerce and trade as well as production. Okay, here's why that is actually unacceptable. Plagiarism isn't just the repetition of words in a correct order. It's actually the repetition of ideas in exactly the same order, regardless of the words that are used. I know what that does for some of you. You're thinking, well, I'm screwed, because of course the ideas would follow a logical order. They would follow the same order. In some cases, there's going to be some wiggle room on this because, like every story has a beginning, middle, and end, there is a certain way to tell, a series of events in a paraphrase or quotation, right? But this is too similar. Look, the rise of industry, the growth of cities, and the expansion of population were three great factors. Okay, well, look, it's here and it's here. The increase of industry, the growth of cities, and the explosion of the population were three large factors of 19th century America, of 19th century American history. As new steam-powered factories became a feature of the American landscape in the East, they transformed farmhands into industrial laborers and provided jobs for the rising tide of immigrants. Okay, as steam-powered companies, steam-powered factories, steam-powered companies, steam-driven companies became more visible in the eastern part of the country, became a feature of the American landscape in the East. So we have similar ideas here that are just being reworded. They transformed, they changed. Farmhands into industrial laborers, farmhands into factory workers. It's the same thing. Provided jobs for the large wave of immigrants, providing jobs for a rising tide of immigrants. You even you even have the oceanic or the nautical reference here. The rising tide, a large wave. It's still water. It's the water symbolism is still being used. It's just a different symbol. With industry came urbanization, the growth of large cities, which became the centers of production, where the Bordens lived. With industry came the growth of large cities like Fall River, where the Bordens lived. It's right there. Listen, I just need to warn you. I've run into this at nearly every year that I've been teaching, and I have to tell you that every year that I run into this, it just happens to fall at a huge milestone in the semester. One year, it was our first essay of the year, and it just so happened that he plagiarized the whole gosh darn thing, and he got a 0 on it, and the students struggled to get above 50% for the entire semester because that first essay was a 0. Just recently, I dealt with this exact same thing where a student plagiarized a final exam and somehow managed to do it entirely. And it was like this. Some cases was word for word, but mostly it was the plagiarism of ideas. Plagiarism of ideas is still a 0, and I have to warn you against it. So make sure that you're citing your sources. Make sure that you're paraphrasing appropriately. Make sure that you're informing your reader where this information has come from and how you've come across it. By the way, here's an acceptable paraphrase. Fall River, where the Borden family lived, was typical of northeastern industrial cities of the 19th century. Notice this came at the end, and now we've put it at the beginning. Steam power production had shifted labor from agriculture to manufacturing. Now we don't have farmhands and factory workers anywhere. We have agriculture to manufacturing. Immigrants arrived in the U.S. They found work in these factories. Okay, so immigrants are still arriving, but now they're arriving, not on a wave or on a tide, but they're just arriving. As a result, populations grew and large urban areas rose. Fall River was one of these manufacturing commercial centers. Williams won. Okay, Williams won. That's where it comes from. And we have to give credit where credit is due. Please, I want you to go over this section in great detail. Go over this video a couple of times. Read this section in detail, and we'll pick it up in the next video.